She thought she had buried the past forever, but when a mysterious knight appears at court, bearing her eyes and her forgotten pain, everything begins to unravel. What secret did the queen hide so long ago? And why has destiny chosen now to bring it back? Thank you so much for watching and for all your comments. Let me know at the end if you liked the story and where you're watching from and why you're following this. The cold wind swept across the stone battlements of Ravencrest Castle, carrying with it the scent of rain and distant pine forests. Queen Eleanor stood alone in her private chambers, her slender fingers pressed against the frost-covered window as she gazed out at the gray English countryside stretching endlessly before her. The heavy velvet curtains, deep crimson and embroidered with golden thread, framed her silhouette like a portrait of sorrow. Her gown, made of the finest midnight blue wool with intricate silver embroidery along the sleeves and bodice, rustled softly as she shifted her weight. A thick fur-lined cloak draped over her shoulders, fastened at her throat with a silver clasp bearing the royal crest. Her dark auburn hair, streaked with the first signs of silver, was pulled back in an elegant braid that fell down her back, and her emerald eyes held a depth of pain that 20 years had failed to diminish. Eleanor was a woman of remarkable beauty, even as the years had etched fine lines around her eyes and mouth. Her features were delicate yet regal, with high cheekbones and a graceful neck that spoke of nobility born and bred. But today, on this particular morning, she looked older than her 42 years. The weight of her secret pressed down upon her shoulders like an invisible crown far heavier than the one she wore during state ceremonies. Behind her, the chamber door creaked open, and her most trusted handmaiden, Catherine, entered quietly. Catherine had served Eleanor since they were both young women, and she was perhaps the only person in the entire kingdom who knew the truth about what had happened 2 decades ago. She was a sturdy woman with kind brown eyes and graying hair tucked beneath a simple linen cap. Her dress was modest but well made, a practical brown wool with a leather belt at the waist. "Your Grace," Catherine said softly, her voice barely above a whisper, "the king has requested your presence in the Great Hall. The northern lords have arrived for the council meeting." Eleanor closed her eyes briefly, steeling herself. King Edmund, her husband of 25 years, was a good man in many ways. He was just, honorable, and beloved by his people. But their marriage had been one of political necessity rather than love, arranged by their fathers when Eleanor was merely 17. She had done her duty, borne him 3 legitimate children, and stood by his side through wars and peacetime alike. Yet there had been one moment, one single transgression, that had changed the course of her life forever. "Tell His Majesty I shall join him shortly," Eleanor replied, her voice steady despite the turmoil in her heart. "I need but a moment to compose myself." Catherine nodded but did not leave immediately. Instead, she approached the queen, her weathered hands reaching out to adjust the fur cloak that had slipped slightly from Eleanor's shoulder. "Your Grace," she began hesitantly, "I must tell you something. There are rumors spreading through the castle, whispers of a young knight who has arrived from the eastern territories, seeking audience with the king." Eleanor's heart skipped a beat, though she kept her expression carefully neutral. "There are always knights seeking audience with the king, Catherine. Why should this one concern me?" Catherine's eyes filled with an emotion Eleanor could not quite name, perhaps compassion, perhaps fear. "Because, my lady, those who have seen him say he bears a striking resemblance to someone from the court's past. They say his eyes are the same unusual shade of green as yours, and that his features, though masculine and strong, carry an unmistakable nobility." The queen's breath caught in her throat. For 20 years, she had lived with the knowledge that somewhere in the kingdom, a child of her blood walked the earth, unaware of his true heritage. It had been the darkest period of her life. Those months before her marriage to Edmund had been formalized. She had been betrothed to him, yes, but he had been away leading military campaigns in France, and in his absence, she had found comfort in the arms of Lord William Ashford, a handsome young nobleman who served her father's court. William had been everything young Eleanor had dreamed of in those innocent days. He was tall and powerfully built, with flowing dark hair and those same striking green eyes that she saw in her own reflection. He had been kind, passionate, and had spoken to her of love and poetry beneath the stars. Their affair had been brief but intense, lasting only 3 months before William was killed in a hunting accident. Eleanor had been devastated by his death, But her grief had been compounded a few weeks later when she discovered she was carrying his child. The panic that had seized her then still felt fresh in her memory. She had been about to marry King Edmund, and presenting him with another man's child would have been catastrophic, not just for her, but for her entire family and the political alliance the marriage represented. Her father would have been disgraced, possibly executed for the breach of contract. War might have erupted between the noble houses. In her desperation, Eleanor had turned to Catherine, who had helped her conceal the pregnancy with carefully constructed gowns and strategic withdrawals from public view, claiming illness. When her time came, Catherine had been there in a remote cottage far from the castle, helping her bring the child into the world in secret. Eleanor had held her son for only a few precious hours, memorizing every detail of his tiny face, his fingers, the way he had looked at her with those already bright green eyes before Catherine had taken him away to be raised by a trusted family in the eastern provinces. The arrangement had been clear. The child would be raised as a commoner, given a good life, but kept far from the royal court. He would never know his mother's identity, and Eleanor would never seek him out. It had been the hardest thing she had ever done, but she had believed it was necessary to protect him, to protect her family, to protect the kingdom from the chaos that the truth would unleash. And now, after 20 years, he might have returned. "What is this knight's name?" Eleanor asked, her voice barely audible. "They call him Sir Damien of Ashford," Catherine replied, and the name struck Eleanor like a physical blow. "He was knighted 3 years ago for valor in defending the eastern borders against raiders. They say he is one of the finest swordsmen in the realm, strong and skilled beyond his years. The king has already expressed interest in meeting him, perhaps even appointing him to the royal guard." Ashford. The family that had raised him had given him William's name, perhaps knowing or suspecting the truth of his parentage. Or perhaps it was mere coincidence, though Eleanor did not believe in coincidences when it came to matters of the heart and fate. "I must see him," Eleanor whispered, more to herself than to Catherine. "But I cannot reveal myself. Not yet. Not until I know for certain." Catherine squeezed her hand gently. "You must be careful, Your Grace. The court has eyes and ears everywhere. Lord Chancellor Pembroke grows more suspicious and power-hungry each day, and he would use any scandal to undermine the king's authority. If he were to discover the truth about Sir Damien—" "I know the risks," Eleanor interrupted, pulling herself together with visible effort. She straightened her shoulders and lifted her chin, once again becoming the queen that the court expected to see. "But I have lived with this secret for 20 years, Catherine. I have mourned in silence, wondered every day whether my son was happy, healthy, safe. If there is even the slightest chance that this young knight is him, I must know. I must see his face, hear his voice, even if I can never tell him who I truly am to him." Catherine nodded solemnly. "Then we must proceed with great caution. Perhaps you could request that the king present this new knight to you formally, as you do with all distinguished visitors to the court. It would not raise suspicion, and it would give you the opportunity to see him up close." "Yes," Eleanor agreed, her mind already racing with possibilities and dangers. "Yes, that would be appropriate. I shall make the request this very afternoon." The two women stood together in silence for a moment longer, the weight of the past heavy between them. Then Eleanor drew in a deep breath, adjusted her cloak once more, and moved toward the door. She had a role to play, a kingdom to help govern, and a husband to support in his duties. But beneath the composed exterior of the queen, her heart thundered with a mother's desperate hope and fear. The great hall of Ravencrest Castle was an imposing space, with high vaulted ceilings supported by massive stone columns. Tapestries depicting great battles and hunts hung on the walls, their rich colors muted by years of smoke from the enormous fireplaces that blazed at either end of the hall. The floor was covered with fresh rushes mixed with herbs, their scent rising with each footstep. Long wooden tables lined the sides of the room, where nobles and courtiers gathered to conduct the business of the realm. King Edmund sat upon his throne at the far end of the hall, a powerfully built man in his late 40s with silver threading through his dark beard. He wore a heavy tunic of deep burgundy wool, trimmed with ermine fur, and a thick leather belt from which hung his ceremonial sword. A simple gold crown rested upon his head, and his sharp blue eyes missed nothing as he surveyed his assembled lords and advisers. Eleanor entered through the side door, and immediately all conversation ceased. The assembled nobles bowed respectfully as she made her way to her own throne, positioned slightly below and to the right of Edmund's. Her movements were graceful and deliberate, every inch the queen they expected to see. "My lord husband," she said, inclining her head toward Edmund as she settled into her seat, arranging her skirts carefully around her. "My dear wife," Edmund replied with genuine warmth. Despite the political nature of their union, they had developed a deep respect and affection for one another over the years. "You are just in time." Lord Pembroke was about to present his report on the Northern Territories. Lord Chancellor Pembroke stepped forward, a thin, hawk-faced man with calculating gray eyes and a pointed beard. He wore rich black velvet trimmed with silver, and his fingers were adorned with several ornate rings. Eleanor had never trusted him, sensing in him an ambition that went beyond mere service to the crown. "Your Majesties," Pembroke began, his voice smooth as silk, "I bring news both promising and concerning from our northern holdings. The harvest has been good and the peasants are content, but there are reports of increased bandit activity along the Scottish border. We may need to dispatch additional troops to secure the trade routes." As Pembroke droned on about taxes and troop deployments, Eleanor's mind wandered. She found herself studying each young knight and nobleman in the hall, searching for any sign of the man Catherine had described. But none seemed to fit the description, and she felt a mixture of disappointment and relief. The council meeting continued for another hour, with various lords presenting their concerns and requests. Eleanor participated when required, offering her counsel on matters of diplomacy and occasionally mediating disputes between the more hot-headed nobles. It was work she had grown skilled at over the years, the delicate balance of power and personality that kept the kingdom running smoothly. Finally, as the formal business began to wind down, Edmund stood and raised his hand for attention. "Before we adjourn, I wish to recognize a young knight who has recently arrived at our court with impressive credentials and recommendations from the Eastern Territories. Sir Damien of Ashford has distinguished himself in service to the realm, and I am considering offering him a position in the Royal Guard. Let him step forward." Eleanor's heart stopped. Her hands gripped the armrests of her throne so tightly that her knuckles turned white, though she kept her face carefully composed. She watched as the assembled crowd parted, creating a path down the center of the hall, and then she saw him. Sir Damien of Ashford walked toward the throne with the confident stride of a trained warrior, yet there was nothing arrogant in his bearing. He was tall, easily over 6 feet, with broad shoulders and a powerful build evident even beneath his travel-worn clothing. He wore a simple but well-made tunic of deep forest green over a shirt of mail, with a leather belt and sturdy boots. A long sword hung at his side, its pommel wrapped in worn leather that spoke of much use. A dark cloak, lined with simple fur, hung from his shoulders, but it was his face that made Eleanor's breath catch in her throat. Even from a distance, she could see the strong jawline, the high cheekbones, the firm mouth. His hair was dark brown, almost black, and fell to his shoulders in waves that he had tied back with a leather cord. And when he drew closer and lifted his eyes to the king, Eleanor saw what she had both hoped and feared to see. Those eyes were the exact shade of green as her own, not the common hazel or brown-green found in many people, but a distinctive emerald that seemed to catch the light. They were William's eyes, the eyes she had fallen in love with all those years ago, and they were her eyes, the eyes she saw in her mirror each morning. This was her son. She knew it with every fiber of her being, knew it in the way a mother knows her child even after decades apart. 20 years of wondering, of imagining, of mourning the loss of the baby she had held so briefly. And now here he stood before her, grown into a man of strength and honor. Damien knelt before the king, bowing his head respectfully. "Your Majesty, I am honored by your recognition and deeply grateful for this audience." His voice was deep and clear, educated despite his common upbringing. The family who had raised him had clearly done well by him, ensuring he received proper training not just in warfare, but in courtly manners and speech. Eleanor felt a surge of gratitude toward those unknown benefactors who had cared for her child. King Edmund gestured for Damien to rise, a pleased expression on his weathered face. "Sir Damien, your reputation precedes you. Lord Garrett of the Eastern Provinces speaks highly of your courage and skill. He tells me you single-handedly defended a village from a band of raiders numbering more than 20 men, holding them off until reinforcements arrived. Such valor deserves recognition." Damien rose to his full height, and Eleanor could see the humble strength in his posture. "I did only what any knight sworn to protect the innocent would do, Your Majesty." The villagers themselves fought bravely alongside me. I merely gave them someone to rally behind. Edmund smiled, clearly impressed by the young knight's modesty. And that is precisely the quality we need in our royal guard. Tell me, Sir Damien, what brings you to Ravencrest? Surely a knight of your abilities could find comfortable service in the Eastern Territories. For the first time, Damien seemed to hesitate, and Eleanor saw something flicker across his handsome features. A shadow of uncertainty, perhaps even pain. Your Majesty, I have served Lord Garrett faithfully for 3 years since receiving my knighthood, but recently I have felt a pull toward the capital, toward the heart of the kingdom. I cannot fully explain it, but it feels as though there is something here I need to find, some part of myself that has always been missing. The words struck Eleanor like arrows to her heart. Could he somehow sense the connection between them, even without knowing the truth? Or was it simply the natural curiosity of an adopted child, wondering about his origins? She wanted desperately to speak, to reach out to him, but she remained frozen in her throne, her training and years of practiced composure holding her in place. Lord Pembroke stepped forward, his sharp eyes studying Damien with obvious suspicion. A curious answer, Sir Damien. What exactly do you hope to find at court? Fame, fortune, or perhaps you seek to rise above your station through royal favor? There was a cutting edge to Pembroke's words, and Eleanor saw Damien's jaw tighten slightly. But when he spoke, his voice remained respectful and controlled. I seek only to serve, Lord Chancellor. I have no illusions about my place in the world. I am a knight of common birth, raised by a family of modest means who showed me great kindness. Whatever I have achieved, I have earned through hard work and dedication. I ask for nothing more than the opportunity to prove my worth through service to the crown. Common birth, you say? Pembroke pressed, circling Damien like a predator assessing prey. And yet you bear the name Ashford. That is a noble name, is it not? One associated with a family that served at this very court some 20 years past. Eleanor's blood ran cold. Pembroke was fishing, probing for weaknesses or secrets. He could not possibly know the truth, but his instincts were sharp, honed by years of political maneuvering. She needed to intervene before his questions led somewhere dangerous. Lord Pembroke, Eleanor said, her voice cutting through the tension in the hall with quiet authority. Many common families share names with noble houses. It is hardly unusual, particularly in the provinces where records are not always meticulously kept. I see no reason to interrogate a knight who comes to us with honest intentions and excellent references. All eyes turned to the Queen, and Eleanor met Pembroke's gaze steadily, letting him see the steel beneath her gracious exterior. The Chancellor bowed slightly, acknowledging her words, but his eyes remained calculating. Of course, Your Majesty. I meant no offense. I simply wish to ensure that those who serve so close to their majesties are thoroughly vetted. Edmund, sensing the growing awkwardness, raised his hand. Sir Damien has been recommended by one of our most trusted lords. That is sufficient for me. However, before I make any final decisions about positions in the Royal Guard, I would see your skills firsthand. Tomorrow morning, you will demonstrate your abilities in the training yard. If you prove as capable as Lord Garrett claims, we shall discuss your future service to the crown. Damien bowed deeply. I am honored, Your Majesty. I shall do my utmost to prove worthy of your consideration. Excellent, Edmund declared. You are dismissed to find quarters and rest from your journey. My steward will see to your accommodations. As Damien turned to leave, his eyes swept briefly across the assembled court, and for just a moment his gaze met Eleanor's. In that instant, something passed between them, a recognition that went beyond words or logic, a connection that seemed to transcend the physical space separating them. Eleanor felt her breath catch, and she saw Damien pause almost imperceptibly, as though he too had felt something unexpected and profound. Then the moment passed, and he continued walking, disappearing through the great doors at the far end of the hall. Eleanor sat perfectly still, her heart pounding so loudly she was certain everyone could hear it. She had seen her son, looked into his eyes, heard his voice, and now she understood that the years of separation had done nothing to diminish the bond between mother and child. If anything, seeing him as a grown man filled her with a fierce pride and a sorrow so deep it threatened to overwhelm her carefully maintained composure. The rest of the court session passed in a blur. Eleanor participated when necessary, offering opinions and guidance, but her mind was elsewhere. replaying every detail of Damien's appearance, every word he had spoken, every gesture and expression. When Edmund finally adjourned the meeting, she rose gracefully and made her way back to her chambers, declining his invitation to join him for the midday meal with a claim of fatigue. Once safely in her private rooms, Eleanor collapsed into a chair by the fireplace, her hands trembling. Catherine appeared moments later, closing and locking the door behind her before rushing to the Queen's side. "Your Grace, I saw him enter the hall. I watched from the servants' gallery. There can be no doubt, can there? He is your son." "No doubt whatsoever," Eleanor whispered, tears finally spilling down her cheeks now that she was away from prying eyes. "Oh, Catherine, he is so like William. The same strength, the same nobility of bearing. And yet he is his own man, shaped by experiences I know nothing about, by people I have never met. He spoke of feeling drawn here, of searching for something missing. Do you think he knows? Could he somehow sense the truth?" Catherine knelt beside her mistress, taking Eleanor's cold hands in her own warm ones. "I do not know, my lady, but I do know this creates a situation of great danger. Lord Pembroke is already suspicious, and you saw how he questioned the boy about his name. We must be extraordinarily careful." "I know," Eleanor said, wiping her tears away with the back of her hand. "I know the risks. But Catherine, I cannot simply ignore his presence. Tomorrow he will demonstrate his skills before the king and court. I must be there. I must see what kind of man my son has become." "Of course you must," Catherine agreed. "But remember, you are the Queen. You must maintain proper distance and decorum. Any unusual interest in this young knight will be noticed and remarked upon." Eleanor nodded, struggling to regain her composure. "You are right, as always. I shall observe him as I would any potential member of the royal guard, nothing more. I shall be careful." But even as she spoke the words, Eleanor knew that being careful would be easier said than done. The maternal instinct that she had suppressed for 20 years had roared back to life the moment she saw Damien, and it took all her strength not to run after him, to embrace him, to tell him everything. She thought of all the years she had missed. His first steps, his first words, watching him grow from boy to man. The grief of those lost years threatened to crush her. The afternoon passed slowly. Eleanor tried to occupy herself with correspondence and needlework, but her hands were unsteady and her mind unable to focus. Finally, as evening approached and shadows lengthened across her chambers, Catherine brought news that made her heart race anew. "Your Grace, I have learned where Sir Damien has been quartered. He has been given rooms in the East Wing, near the other knights of the guard. I also learned something else. He has requested permission to visit the castle's library. Apparently, he is quite well read and wishes to study the histories of the realm." Eleanor stood abruptly, pacing to the window. "A warrior who values learning. That speaks well of his character and his upbringing. I wonder what else his adoptive family taught him." "Perhaps," Catherine said carefully, "you might also visit the library this evening. It is not unusual for you to spend time there. You are known to be learned and to enjoy reading. If you happen to encounter Sir Damien there, it would seem merely coincidental." Eleanor turned to look at her faithful handmaiden, seeing the understanding in her eyes. "You suggest I seek him out?" "I suggest nothing improper, Your Grace. Merely that if you wish to learn more about this young knight, observing him in a setting where you might converse naturally would be wise. The library is a public space within the castle."
There would be nothing inappropriate about the Queen speaking with a visiting knight about literature and history. Eleanor considered this. The temptation was enormous, but so were the risks. Yet Catherine was right. The library would provide a neutral setting where she could speak with Damien without arousing suspicion. She could learn about him, hear his voice, perhaps understand better the life he had led. Very well, Eleanor decided. I shall go to the library after supper.
"But you must accompany me, Catherine, to maintain propriety." "Of course, my lady. I would not have it any other way." As the sun set over Ravencrest Castle, painting the sky in shades of amber and crimson, Eleanor prepared herself for what might be the most difficult conversation of her life. She changed into a simpler gown, still befitting her station, but less formal than her court attire, a deep green wool dress with embroidered sleeves and a modest fur-lined surcoat. She left her crown in its place and instead wore her hair in a simple braid with a delicate silver circlet. She wanted to appear approachable, not intimidating. The castle library was housed in a tower on the southern side of the main keep. A circular room with tall windows and walls lined floor to ceiling with shelves holding precious books and scrolls. A spiral staircase in the center led to an upper gallery that held even more volumes. Several reading tables were scattered throughout the space, illuminated by oil lamps and the fading evening light filtering through the windows. When Eleanor and Catherine entered, they found Damien seated at one of the tables near a window, a thick volume open before him. He was so absorbed in his reading that he did not immediately notice their entrance. Eleanor paused in the doorway, taking the opportunity to observe him unnoticed. He had removed his cloak and the outer layer of his armor, sitting in just his tunic and breeches. His dark hair fell forward slightly as he bent over the book, and she could see his lips moving slightly as he read, completely engrossed in whatever text held his attention. There was something endearing about seeing this powerful warrior so focused on learning, so hungry for knowledge. Catherine cleared her throat softly, and Damien looked up, his green eyes widening in surprise as he recognized the queen. He immediately stood and bowed deeply, nearly knocking over the chair in his haste. "Your Majesty, forgive me. I did not hear you enter. I should have been more attentive." Eleanor smiled gently, moving further into the library. "Please, Sir Damien, do not apologize for being absorbed in your studies. It is a rare quality in a knight to value the written word as much as the sword. What are you reading that holds your attention so completely?" Damien glanced down at the book, a slight flush coloring his cheeks. "It is a history of the kingdom, Your Majesty. The chronicles of the English realm, covering the past 50 years. I confess I am trying to better understand the court I now find myself in, to learn about the families and alliances that shape the political landscape." "A wise approach," Eleanor said, gesturing for him to sit back down. She moved to a nearby chair, and Catherine took up a position by the door, maintaining a respectful distance, but remaining as chaperone. "And what have you learned so far?" Damien settled back into his chair, seeming to relax slightly, as he realized the queen was genuinely interested in conversation, rather than testing or judging him. "I have learned that the kingdom has known both great prosperity and terrible conflict within living memory. That the current peace, under King Edmund's wise rule, was hard-won and must be carefully maintained. And I have learned that the great families of the realm have long memories and sometimes even longer grudges." Eleanor nodded approvingly. "You grasped the essential truths quickly. The peace we enjoy now is precious precisely because it is fragile. One misstep, one scandal, one betrayal could shatter it and plunge us back into chaos." She watched Damien's face carefully as she spoke, wondering if he caught the deeper meaning in her words, the warning about secrets and revelations that could destroy everything. But he seemed to take her words at face value, nodding thoughtfully. "That is why I hope to serve the king well, Your Majesty. I may be of common birth, but I understand the responsibility that comes with being entrusted with the kingdom's security. I would never do anything to jeopardize the peace or betray the trust placed in me." The earnestness in his voice moved Eleanor deeply. Here was a young man of genuine integrity and honor, despite, or perhaps because of, his humble upbringing. She felt a swell of maternal pride, mixed with the ever-present ache of all the years she had missed. "Tell me about yourself, Sir Damien," Eleanor said, leaning forward slightly. "Where were you raised? What was your childhood like?" Damien seemed surprised by the personal question, but he answered readily enough. "I was raised in the village of Millbrook in the Eastern Territories, Your Majesty. My adoptive parents, John and Mary Ashford, were innkeepers. They found me as an infant, left at their doorstep with nothing but a small purse of coins, and a note saying my mother could not care for me but wanted me to have a good life." Eleanor's throat tightened, but she maintained her composure. They must have been good people, to take in a foundling child. "The best," Damien said, and genuine warmth filled his voice. "They had no children of their own, and they raised me as their son. They were not wealthy, but they ensured I learned to read and write. When I showed an aptitude for combat, they scraped together enough money to send me to train with the local lord's master-at-arms. They gave me everything they had, asked for nothing in return except that I grow into a man of honor. And they clearly succeeded," Eleanor said softly. "You speak of them with great love." "I do love them," Damien confirmed. "Though I confess, Your Majesty, I have always wondered about my birth mother. Who was she? Why did she give me up? Was it truly because she could not care for me, or was there some other reason? I do not judge her. I know that sometimes circumstances force impossible choices." but I would give much to know the truth, to understand where I truly come from." The longing in his voice was palpable, and Eleanor felt tears threatening again. She wanted so desperately to tell him everything, to ease that lifelong wondering and fill the void she knew existed in his heart. But she could not without risking everything: his life, her position, the stability of the kingdom. "Perhaps," Eleanor said carefully, choosing her words with great care, "your mother gave you up precisely because she loved you. Perhaps keeping you would have put you in terrible danger, and giving you to good people who could raise you safely was the greatest act of love she could offer." Damien looked at her intently, and Eleanor saw intelligence and perception in those green eyes, so like her own. "Do you truly believe that, Your Majesty? That a mother could love a child so much she would give him away?" "I do," Eleanor whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "I believe a mother's love is the strongest force in the world, and that sometimes it requires the greatest sacrifice. Your mother, whoever she was, clearly wanted you to live and thrive. She gave you a chance at a good life. That is not abandonment, Sir Damien. That is love." Damien stared at the Queen for a long moment, and Eleanor saw something shift in his expression, a recognition of the deep emotion behind her words, though he could not possibly understand its true source. "Thank you, Your Majesty," he said quietly. "I have never heard anyone speak of it quite that way before. It brings me comfort to think that perhaps my birth mother made her choice out of love rather than necessity or shame." Eleanor nodded, not trusting herself to speak further on the subject without revealing too much. She needed to change the direction of their conversation before her emotions overwhelmed her carefully maintained composure. "Tell me more about your training, Sir Damien. How did you come to be knighted at such a young age? You cannot be more than 20 years old." "I am exactly 20, Your Majesty," Damien confirmed, and Eleanor's heart clenched at the precision of his age. She knew it down to the day, having given birth to him on a cold winter morning much like this one. "I began training with the sword at age 10, when the master-at-arms at Lord Garrett's estate noticed me practicing with a wooden stick, mimicking the movements of the soldiers I had watched. He took me on as a student, and I trained every day for years, learning not just combat but strategy, horsemanship, and the code of chivalry." He paused, his fingers absently tracing the edge of the book before him. "When I was 17, raiders attacked Millbrook. They came at night, more than 20 armed men seeking to plunder and burn. The local garrison was away on patrol, and there were only a handful of men in the village capable of fighting. I organized the defense, armed the villagers with whatever weapons we could find, and held the attackers at the bridge until Lord Garrett's forces arrived. We lost only 2 men, though many were wounded. Lord Garrett knighted me on the battlefield that very night, saying that true nobility was proven through actions, not blood." Eleanor felt pride swelling in her chest, so powerful it was almost painful. Her son was not just a skilled warrior, but a natural leader, someone who protected the innocent and inspired others to courage. "Lord Garrett was right," she said. "True nobility comes from the heart and the choices we make. You have proven yourself worthy of your knighthood many times over, I suspect." "I have tried to live by the ideals I was taught," Damien replied with characteristic modesty. "Though I confess, Your Majesty, I find the politics of court far more challenging than any battlefield. In combat, the lines are clear. You know who your enemies are and what you must do. Here, everyone smiles and speaks in pleasantries, but I sense undercurrents I do not fully understand. Lord Pembroke, for instance, seemed to regard me with suspicion from the moment I entered the hall." Eleanor appreciated his perceptiveness. Lord Pembroke is the King's Chancellor, and it is his duty to be suspicious of newcomers to court. He has served King Edmund for many years and is fiercely protective of the Crown's interests. Do not take his questioning personally. He subjects everyone to the same scrutiny. "Even you, Your Majesty?" Damien asked, then immediately looked stricken. "Forgive me, that was impertinent. I should not have spoken so freely." But Eleanor smiled, finding his honesty refreshing in a court where most people measured every word 3 times before speaking. "It is a fair question, and I shall answer it honestly. Yes, even me. Especially me, in fact, when I first arrived at court as King Edmund's bride. I was young, barely 18, and I came from a minor noble house. Many at court wondered if I was suitable to be queen, if I had the strength and wisdom to stand beside the king. I had to prove myself, just as you will have to do." Damien leaned forward, clearly interested. "How did you prove yourself, if I may ask?" Eleanor considered her answer carefully, thinking back to those early days of her marriage, when she had been drowning in guilt over her secret while trying to establish herself in her new role. I listened more than I spoke at first. I observed the dynamics of the court, learned who the key players were, understood their motivations and alliances. I made myself useful to the king, offering counsel when asked and supporting his decisions publicly, even when we disagreed privately. And I never forgot that my primary duty was to the kingdom and its people, not to my own comfort or desires. That sounds like a lonely existence, Damien observed with surprising insight, always putting duty before personal happiness. It can be, Eleanor admitted, meeting his eyes directly. But it is also deeply fulfilling to serve something greater than oneself. And I have found that happiness can be found in unexpected places, in small moments of connection, in the satisfaction of helping to govern wisely, in watching the kingdom prosper under good leadership. They sat in companionable silence for a moment, the only sound the crackling of the fire in the library's hearth and the distant calls of night birds outside the windows. Eleanor found herself marveling at how natural this conversation felt, how easy it was to talk with Damien. Was it the blood connection between them, or simply his genuine and open nature that made her feel so comfortable in his presence? "Your Majesty," Damien said suddenly, his voice hesitant, "may I ask you something that may seem strange?" "Of course," Eleanor replied, though her heart began to beat faster with apprehension. "When I first saw you in the Great Hall today, I felt something I cannot quite explain. It was as though I recognized you, though we have never met before, as though some part of me knew you. Have you ever experienced such a thing? Meeting someone for the first time and yet feeling an inexplicable familiarity?" Eleanor's breath caught in her throat. He felt it too, the connection between them, the invisible thread that bound mother to child. She had to answer carefully, to acknowledge the truth of his feeling without revealing its source. "I have experienced something similar," she said slowly, choosing each word with care. "I believe that sometimes souls recognize each other, that there are connections between people that transcend ordinary understanding. Perhaps in another life we knew each other, or perhaps we are simply kindred spirits who see the world in similar ways." Damien nodded thoughtfully. "I have never been one to believe in mystical explanations, Your Majesty. I prefer logic and reason. Yet I cannot deny what I felt, what I still feel. There is something about you that makes me feel safe, I suppose, as though I could trust you with anything." The irony of his words nearly broke Eleanor's composure. He trusted her, yet she was keeping the most important secret of his life from him. But what choice did she have? Telling him the truth would not only endanger both of them, but could potentially tear the kingdom apart. Before she could formulate a response, the library door opened and Lord Pembroke entered, his sharp eyes immediately taking in the scene before him. The Queen seated in intimate conversation with the new young knight, alone save for the handmaiden discreetly stationed by the door. "Your Majesty," Pembroke said, bowing but with a calculating gleam in his eyes. "I had not expected to find you here at this hour. I came seeking a volume on property law for a case I am reviewing." Eleanor rose gracefully, immediately assuming the formal bearing of the Queen. "Lord Chancellor, I often come to the library in the evenings when court duties permit. I find reading helps settle my mind before sleep. I encountered Sir Damien here and was simply engaging in polite conversation about his studies." "Of course, Your Majesty," Pembroke said smoothly, though his eyes flickered between Eleanor and Damien with obvious interest. "And what subjects were you discussing, if I may ask?" "The history of the realm," Damien interjected, standing as well and gesturing to the book before him. Her Majesty was kind enough to share some insights about the court and the importance of understanding political dynamics. "How generous of Her Majesty to take such personal interest in a newly arrived knight," Pembroke observed, his tone neutral but his implication clear. "I am sure Sir Damien appreciates the Queen's valuable time and attention." Eleanor felt a flash of anger at Pembroke's insinuation, but she kept her voice cool and regal. "I take interest in all who serve the King and Kingdom well, Lord Chancellor. It is part of my duty to help foster loyalty and understanding among those who protect us. Now, if you will excuse me, the hour grows late and I must retire. Sir Damien, I wish you well in tomorrow's demonstration. I am certain you will acquit yourself admirably." She swept from the library with Catherine following close behind, but not before she caught the speculative look Pembroke directed at both her and Damien. The Chancellor's suspicions had clearly been aroused, and Eleanor knew she would need to be even more careful going forward. Once safely back in her chambers, Eleanor paced before the fireplace while Catherine prepared a calming tea. "He suspects something," Eleanor said, her voice tight with worry. "Pembroke is too clever by half. He saw us talking together and immediately began drawing conclusions." "Not necessarily the right conclusions," Catherine pointed out, bringing the tea to her mistress. "He may simply think you are being kind to a promising young knight, or perhaps that you find him attractive. Such things are not unheard of in royal courts." Eleanor whirled to face her. "That is hardly better. Any suggestion of impropriety between the Queen and a knight young enough to be her son would be scandalous. And if Pembroke starts investigating Damien's background more closely, who knows what he might uncover. The family who raised him know nothing of his true parentage," Catherine reminded her. "They found him on their doorstep with no indication of where he came from. The trail is cold after 20 years. But the timing," Eleanor said, sinking into a chair and pressing her fingers to her temples. "Pembroke already remarked on the Ashford name. If he starts calculating dates, he might remember that Lord William Ashford died around the time I was betrothed to Edmund. He might start asking questions about whether William left any illegitimate children, and if he discovers that a baby appeared in the eastern provinces at exactly the right time." Catherine knelt beside Eleanor's chair, taking her trembling hands. "Then we must ensure he has no reason to pursue such investigations. You must be scrupulously correct in your behavior toward Sir Damien from now on. Treat him exactly as you would any other knight, with courtesy but no special favor or attention." "You are right," Eleanor whispered, though the thought of maintaining distance from her son made her heart ache. "I must be more careful. But Catherine, speaking with him tonight, learning about his life, seeing the fine man he has become, it was both wonderful and heartbreaking. I want so desperately to know him, to be part of his life, even if he can never know the truth." "I understand, my lady," Catherine said gently, "but you must remember what is at stake. Not just your position or reputation, but Damien's life. If his true parentage were revealed, he could be seen as a threat to the succession, a potential rallying point for those who oppose King Edmund. There are factions at court who would use him or destroy him to serve their own ends." Eleanor knew Catherine spoke the truth. The kingdom had 3 legitimate heirs, her children with Edmund. But a son born of her union with William Ashford, even though it predated her marriage, could be used by ambitious nobles to sow discord and division. Damien would become a pawn in political games he could not hope to understand or defend against. "Then I shall be the Queen and nothing more to him," Eleanor said, straightening her shoulders with resolve. "I shall observe tomorrow's demonstration with appropriate royal interest, nothing excessive, and I shall pray that his skill earns him a place in the royal guard, where I can at least see him from time to time and know that he is safe and well." The next morning dawned cold and clear, with frost coating the castle grounds and a glittering blanket of white. The training yard was located in the inner bailey, a large open space surrounded by stone walls where the royal guard practiced daily. By the time Eleanor arrived with her ladies-in-waiting, a substantial crowd had already gathered. Knights, nobles, servants, and courtiers, all curious to see the young knight who had impressed Lord Garrett enough to earn such strong recommendations. Eleanor took her place in the covered gallery reserved for the royal family, with Catherine and several other ladies arranged around her. King Edmund was already seated, and he smiled warmly at his wife as she settled beside him. "I am eager to see this young man's abilities," Edmund said. "Lord Garrett's letter praised him extravagantly. I hope the reality lives up to the reputation." "I am certain it will," Eleanor replied, keeping her tone neutral and appropriate. She noticed Lord Pembroke standing nearby, watching her with those calculating eyes, and she was grateful for her years of practice in maintaining a serene expression that revealed nothing of her inner turmoil. The yard fell silent as Damien entered, accompanied by the captain of the guard, Sir Harold Blackstone, a grizzled veteran with scars marking his weathered face and arms as thick as tree trunks. Damien wore simple training leathers and carried a practice sword, but even in such plain attire, he cut an impressive figure. Eleanor heard several of the younger ladies-in-waiting whispering appreciatively about his appearance, and she felt an unexpected surge of maternal possessiveness. "Sir Damien," King Edmund called out, his voice carrying across the yard, "you stand accused of being one of the finest swordsmen in the Eastern Territories. Sir Harold will test that claim. Defend yourself well, and you may earn a place among my personal guard." Damien bowed deeply. "I shall do my best, your majesty." Sir Harold drew his practice sword, a weapon of wood weighted to match a real blade. "Do not hold back, boy. I want to see what you can truly do." What followed was a display of martial skill that left the assembled crowd breathless. Damien moved with a fluid grace that seemed almost impossible for a man of his size and strength. He parried Harold's initial attacks with ease, his footwork precise and economical. As the pace of the combat increased, it became clear that Damien was not merely defending, but analyzing his opponent's patterns, learning his rhythms and weaknesses. Eleanor watched with her heart in her throat, pride and fear warring within her. Pride at his obvious skill and the way he commanded the space, moving like a dancer who had been born with a sword in his hand. Fear that he might be injured, that she might watch her son hurt while being unable to cry out or rush to his aid. Sir Harold pressed his attack, using his greater experience and raw strength to drive Damien back toward the wall. But just when it seemed the older knight had him cornered, Damien executed a brilliant maneuver, ducking under a high swing, rolling to the side, and coming up behind Harold to tap his practice blade against the captain's back. "First touch to Sir Damien," the Master of Arms called out, and the crowd erupted in excited chatter. Sir Harold turned, grinning fiercely. "Well struck, boy, but do not think the fight is over. Best of 5 touches wins." The combat resumed with increased intensity. Harold abandoned any pretense of going easy on his opponent, attacking with the full force of his considerable skill. But Damien met him blow for blow, their practice swords cracking together with sharp reports that echoed off the stone walls. Sweat gleamed on both men's faces despite the cold morning air, their breath coming in visible puffs. The second touch went to Harold, a clever feint that caught Damien off guard and resulted in a tap to his shoulder. The third touch was Damien's, a lightning-quick riposte that slipped past Harold's guard to strike his chest. The fourth was Harold's again, won through sheer tenacity and experience. 2 touches each. The entire yard held its breath as the 2 warriors circled each other, both breathing hard now, both seeking any advantage. Eleanor found herself leaning forward unconsciously, her hands gripped together so tightly her knuckles were white. Then Damien did something unexpected. Instead of waiting for Harold to attack, he suddenly went on the offensive, unleashing a flurry of strikes so fast they were almost impossible to follow. Harold defended desperately, giving ground with each exchange, and then Damien's blade found its mark, a controlled thrust that stopped just short of Harold's throat. "5th touch to Sir Damien," the Master of Arms declared. "Victory is his." The crowd erupted in cheers and applause. King Edmund rose from his seat, beaming with satisfaction. "Magnificent! Sir Harold, what say you?" The captain of the guard lowered his weapon and clasped Damien's forearm in a warrior's grip. "The boy is as good as advertised, your majesty. Better even. I have not been bested in practice combat in 5 years. He has earned his place in the royal guard, if you will have him." "I will indeed," Edmund declared. "Sir Damien of Ashford, I hereby appoint you to the royal guard, with all the privileges and responsibilities that position entails. You will swear your oath this evening at the feast I am holding in honor of the northern lords." Damien dropped to one knee, his head bowed in gratitude and respect. "Your Majesty, I am deeply honored. I swear to serve you and the kingdom with every breath in my body, to protect the crown and the realm with my life if necessary. I shall not fail you." Eleanor watched the scene unfold, her heart swelling with emotions she could barely contain. Her son was now a member of the royal guard, which meant he would be close, present at court functions, stationed within the castle walls. She would see him regularly, watch him from a distance, know that he was safe under the king's protection. It was both a blessing and a torment, to have him so near and yet be unable to claim him as her own. As the crowd began to disperse, many nobles and courtiers approaching Damien to offer their congratulations, Eleanor forced herself to remain in her seat beside Edmund, maintaining the appropriate regal distance. She allowed herself only a brief smile and a slight nod when Damien glanced up at the royal gallery, his green eyes seeking hers for just a moment before he was surrounded by well-wishers. "You seem pleased, my dear," Edmund observed, turning to her with affection. "I am glad. I know you take great interest in ensuring we have the finest warriors protecting our family." "Indeed," Eleanor replied carefully. "Sir Damien's skill is impressive. You have chosen well, my lord. He will be an asset to the guard. Edmund patted her hand absently, already discussing logistics with Sir Harold about integrating the new knight into the guard's rotation. Eleanor took the opportunity to retreat to her chambers, pleading the need to prepare for the evening's feast. Once alone with Catherine, Eleanor allowed herself to sink onto a cushioned bench, her carefully maintained composure finally cracking. "He was magnificent, Catherine. Did you see how he moved? The strength and grace combined. And the honor he showed to Sir Harold even in victory. That speaks to the quality of his character." "He acquitted himself admirably," Catherine agreed, bringing Eleanor a cup of wine. "But my lady, I must speak plainly. Lord Pembroke watched you very closely during the demonstration. I saw him noting every expression that crossed your face, every movement you made. He is suspicious, and he will be watching even more carefully now that Sir Damien has been appointed to the Royal Guard." Eleanor took a long drink of wine, feeling its warmth spread through her chest. "Then I must be beyond reproach. I must treat Damien exactly as I treat every other member of the guard, with courtesy but nothing more. No private conversations, no special attention. It will be agony, Catherine, but I have no choice." The afternoon passed in a blur of preparation for the evening's feast. Eleanor's ladies-in-waiting helped her dress in a magnificent gown of deep burgundy velvet, embroidered with gold thread in intricate patterns that caught the light. The sleeves were long and fitted, lined with soft ermine fur, and the bodice was cut to emphasize her still graceful figure. A heavy gold necklace adorned with rubies encircled her throat, and her hair was arranged in an elaborate style, woven through with gold ribbons and topped with her crown. She looked every inch the queen, powerful and untouchable. The great hall had been transformed for the feast. Long tables laden with roasted meats, fresh bread, wheels of cheese, and flagons of wine filled the space. Torches blazed in their sconces on the walls, and musicians played softly in one corner. The northern lords sat at places of honor near the king's table, while the rest of the nobility arranged themselves according to rank and favor. Eleanor entered on Edmund's arm, and the entire hall rose to bow as the royal couple made their way to the high table at the far end of the room. As she took her seat, Eleanor's eyes swept the hall, finding Damien immediately despite the crowd. He stood with the other knights of the royal guard along the wall, wearing new livery that marked him as one of the king's own men. A deep blue tunic emblazoned with the royal crest, over which he wore a leather jerkin and a short sword at his hip. He looked proud and slightly overwhelmed, clearly unused to such grand occasions. The feast began with Edmund standing to welcome his guests and announce Damien's appointment to the guard. "Tonight we celebrate not only the continued alliance with our northern friends, but also the addition of a fine warrior to our ranks. Sir Damien of Ashford has proven himself worthy through skill and courage, and I am pleased to call him one of my personal guards. Sir Damien, step forward." Damien moved through the crowd to kneel before the king's table, his head bowed respectfully. Edmund drew his ceremonial sword, touching it lightly to each of Damien's shoulders. "Do you swear to protect the crown, to defend the realm, to uphold justice and honor in all your actions?" "I do so swear, your majesty," Damien replied, his voice clear and strong. "Do you swear to serve faithfully, to obey lawful commands, to place duty above personal desire?" "I do so swear." "Then rise, Sir Damien, knight of the royal guard, and take your place among the finest warriors in the kingdom." Damien stood, and the hall erupted in applause. Eleanor joined in the clapping, allowing herself a warm smile that any queen might show to a promising young knight. But inside, her heart was breaking and soaring simultaneously, pride in her son's achievement warring with the knowledge that she could never acknowledge their true relationship. As Damien returned to his position with the other guards, Lord Pembroke rose from his seat and approached the king's table, bowing deeply. "Your Majesty, if I might have a word about another matter requiring your attention?" Edmund nodded, and Pembroke leaned in to speak quietly, though Eleanor could hear every word. "Sire, I have received troubling reports from the southern provinces. There are rumors of unrest among the common folk, complaints about excessive taxation and harsh treatment by some of the local lords. If left unattended, such discontent could fester into rebellion." Edmund frowned, his earlier good mood dimming. "This is the first I have heard of such problems. Why was I not informed sooner?" "The reports only reached me this morning, your Majesty. I thought it best to bring them to your attention immediately, though I did not wish to spoil the feast. Perhaps we might discuss the matter in detail tomorrow at council." Yes, yes, we shall address it then, Edmund agreed, waving his hand dismissively. Tonight is for celebration. We shall deal with troubles on the morrow. But Pembroke was not finished. There is one other small matter, sire. In reviewing the records as part of my investigation into these southern complaints, I came across some old documents regarding noble lineages. I noticed some irregularities in certain family trees, gaps in the historical record that should perhaps be filled in to ensure the integrity of our archives. Eleanor felt her blood run cold. Pembroke was probing, fishing for something, though she could not be certain what. She kept her expression neutral, but she saw Catherine, seated at a lower table, stiffen noticeably. "What sort of irregularities?" Edmund asked, taking a drink of wine, clearly not particularly interested. "Oh, minor things, Your Majesty. Questions about certain births and deaths that were not properly recorded, that sort of thing. For instance, I was trying to trace the Ashford family line, a noble house that served your father's court but seems to have died out about 20 years ago. I wondered if there might be any surviving relatives, any connection to our new knight, Sir Damien." The Chancellor's eyes flicked briefly to Eleanor as he spoke, and she knew without doubt that he suspected something. He was too cunning, too observant, and he had clearly noticed her interest in Damien. Now he was systematically investigating, looking for any connection, any scandal he could exploit. "I very much doubt there is any connection," Edmund said dismissively. "As I recall, Lord William Ashford died in a hunting accident without heirs. The title and lands reverted to the crown. Our Sir Damien likely carries the name by pure coincidence, as the Queen suggested. Common families often adopt noble names with no actual blood connection." "Of course, Your Majesty. I am certain you are correct. I simply thought it worth investigating, as part of my duty to maintain accurate records." Pembroke bowed and withdrew, but not before shooting one more significant look at Eleanor. The message was clear. He was watching, investigating, and would not rest until he uncovered whatever secrets might be hidden. Eleanor managed to maintain her composure through the rest of the feast, laughing at appropriate moments, engaging in pleasant conversation with the northern lords, and presenting the perfect image of a content queen. But inside, her mind raced with worry and fear. Pembroke was getting too close, asking too many questions. If he connected the timing of William Ashford's death with the appearance of a baby in the eastern provinces, if he dug deep enough into old records and found witnesses who remembered seeing Eleanor indisposed during those months before her marriage, the feast finally ended near midnight, with most of the guests unsteady on their feet from too much wine and rich food. Eleanor excused herself, claiming fatigue, and Edmund kissed her hand gallantly before she withdrew with her ladies. But instead of heading directly to her chambers, Eleanor dismissed her attendants and, with only Catherine accompanying her, made her way to a small private chapel within the castle. The chapel was dark and quiet, lit only by a few candles flickering before the altar. Eleanor sank to her knees on the cold stone floor, her hands clasped in prayer. Catherine stood guard at the door, ensuring they would not be disturbed. "Please," Eleanor whispered into the darkness, her voice breaking. "Please show me what to do. I cannot tell him the truth. It would destroy him, destroy everything. But I cannot bear to watch Pembroke hunt him like prey, to see my son used as a political weapon against the king, against me. He is innocent in all of this. He deserves to know who he is, where he came from, but telling him could cost him his life." She remained there for a long time, tears streaming down her face, praying for guidance that did not come. Finally, Catherine touched her shoulder gently. "My lady, we must return to your chambers before your absence is noted." Eleanor rose stiffly, her knees aching from the cold stone. As they turned to leave, she found Damien standing in the chapel doorway, clearly having come to pray himself after the excitement of the day. His eyes widened in surprise at finding the Queen there, especially in such obvious distress. "Your Majesty, forgive me. I did not mean to intrude. I will leave you to your prayers." "No, please," Eleanor said, wiping her tears away quickly. "I was just leaving. The chapel is yours." But Damien stepped closer, concern evident in his handsome face. "Your Majesty, you are upset. Is there anything I can do? Any service I can render?" The kindness in his voice nearly undid her completely. "You are kind to ask, Sir Damien, but this is not a matter where a knight's sword can help, I fear. These are troubles of the heart and conscience that I must work through on my own. Perhaps," Damien said gently. But sometimes it helps simply to speak of what troubles us, even if there is no solution readily apparent. You showed me great kindness in the library last night, listening to my concerns and offering wisdom. If I can return that favor in any small way, I would be honored. Eleanor looked at him, this young man who was her son, though he could never know it, and she felt the overwhelming urge to tell him everything, to unburden herself of 20 years of secrecy and pain, to finally speak the truth aloud. But Catherine's warning glance reminded her of the dangers, and she swallowed the words before they could escape. You are right that sometimes speaking helps, Eleanor said carefully. Tell me, Sir Damien, if you learned a truth that could destroy innocent lives, would you reveal it, even if keeping the secret caused you great personal pain? Damien considered the question seriously, his brow furrowing in thought. That would depend on the nature of the truth, Your Majesty. If revealing it would cause more harm than keeping it hidden, then I believe silence would be the honorable choice. But if the truth being hidden meant that someone was living a lie, denied their rightful place or identity, then perhaps they deserve to know, regardless of the consequences. And if telling them put their very life in danger? Eleanor pressed. If powerful people would see them destroyed simply because of who they were, then I would want to protect them, Damien answered immediately. I would want to find a way to keep them safe while still honoring the truth. Though I confess, Your Majesty, I do not know how one would accomplish such a thing. It sounds like an impossible situation. It is, Eleanor whispered. It is impossible, and yet it is the situation I find myself in. Damien moved closer, and Eleanor could smell the clean scent of him, see the firelight reflected in those green eyes so like her own. Your Majesty, I know I am new to court, and have no right to speak so freely, but I sense you carry a heavy burden. Whatever it is, I want you to know that you have my loyalty absolutely. If there is ever anything I can do to ease your troubles, you need only ask. The sincerity in his voice moved Eleanor beyond words. Here was her son, offering to help her, to protect her, without any idea that he was the very source of her dilemma. Thank you, Sir Damien. Your loyalty means more to me than you can possibly know. They stood there in the candlelit chapel, mother and son unknowingly sharing a moment of deep connection, until Catherine cleared her throat softly. Your Majesty, it grows very late. Yes, of course, Eleanor said, reluctantly stepping back. Good night, Sir Damien. May your prayers bring you peace. And yours as well, Your Majesty. As Eleanor and Catherine made their way through the dark corridors back to the Queen's chambers, Eleanor's mind was in turmoil. Damien's words echoed in her thoughts, the idea that someone deserved to know their true identity, even if it was dangerous. Was she being selfish, keeping the truth from him to protect herself and the kingdom? Or was she being a good mother, shielding her son from knowledge that could get him killed? When they reached her chambers, Catherine helped her out of the heavy gown and into a simple nightdress. As Eleanor sat before the fire, brushing out her long hair, Catherine spoke quietly. My lady, I fear Lord Pembroke will not rest until he uncovers something he can use. We must be prepared for the possibility that he will discover the truth, or at least enough of it to cause serious trouble. I know, Eleanor said wearily. But what can we do? We cannot silence Pembroke without arousing even more suspicion, and we cannot tell Damien the truth without putting him in mortal danger. Perhaps, Catherine suggested hesitantly, there is a middle path. What if we could ensure that if the truth does come out, it comes out in a way we can control? What if we prepare Damien gradually, plant seeds of possibility in his mind, so that when the revelation comes, it is not such a shock? Eleanor turned to look at her faithful servant. You mean tell him pieces of the truth without revealing everything? Not tell him directly, no, but perhaps ensure he has access to information that might lead him to draw his own conclusions. Old documents, family histories, that sort of thing. If he discovers the truth himself, gradually and in private, he might have time to process it and decide how to proceed. And if Pembroke does uncover evidence, Damien will already be somewhat prepared. It was a risky strategy, but Eleanor could see the wisdom in it. You are suggesting we guide him toward the truth rather than hiding it completely? I am suggesting we give him the tools to discover his own heritage, should he choose to look. That way, if the worst happens and Pembroke reveals what he knows publicly, Damien will not be completely blindsided. He will have had time to think, to prepare, perhaps even to develop a relationship with you that makes the revelation less shocking. Eleanor considered this carefully. It went against every instinct she had developed over 20 years of secrecy, but Catherine might be right. The truth had a way of coming out eventually, and perhaps it would be better if Damien discovered it on his own terms, rather than having it weaponized against him by Pembroke. Very well, Eleanor decided. Tomorrow I shall speak with the castle librarian. I shall ensure that certain documents are made available, placed where an inquisitive young knight studying the history of the realm might find them. Letters from William Ashford, records of his service at court, perhaps even the chronicle entries from the year of Damien's birth. Nothing that directly states the truth, but enough that an intelligent man might begin to piece together the puzzle. "And what will you do if he comes to you with questions?" Catherine asked. Eleanor was quiet for a long moment, staring into the flames. "I shall tell him the truth, not all at once, but I shall not lie to him if he asks me directly. He deserves that much at least. And perhaps, if we are very careful, we can find a way to acknowledge our connection privately, while maintaining the public fiction that he is simply a talented knight of common birth." It was not a perfect solution. There were no perfect solutions to impossible situations, but it was something. It was a path forward, a way to honor both the truth and the need to protect her son from those who would use his heritage against him. The following morning dawned gray and cold, with heavy clouds promising snow before nightfall. Eleanor rose early, her mind already focused on the delicate task ahead. She dressed in a simple gown of dark blue wool, practical and warm, with minimal ornamentation. Today, she needed to be subtle, to move through the castle without drawing undue attention to herself. After breaking her fast with Catherine in her private chambers, Eleanor made her way to the library tower. The elderly librarian, Brother Timothy, was a monk who had served the royal family for decades, cataloging and preserving the precious books and documents that chronicled the kingdom's history. He was a small, wizened man with ink-stained fingers and kind eyes that peered through spectacles perched on his thin nose. "Your Majesty," he said, bowing deeply as Eleanor entered. "This is an unexpected honor. How may I serve you?" "Good Brother Timothy," Eleanor said warmly, "I have a task that requires your particular expertise and discretion. I have been thinking about the education of our young knights, particularly those newly appointed to the Royal Guard. They should understand not just the art of war, but also the history and traditions of the families they serve." Brother Timothy nodded enthusiastically. "An excellent thought, Your Majesty. An educated warrior is far more valuable than one who knows only how to swing a sword." "Precisely. I would like you to prepare a selection of documents and histories that would be particularly instructive for a young man seeking to understand the court and the noble families who have served the crown. Perhaps you could include some personal correspondence from knights of previous generations, chronicles from significant years in our recent history, that sort of thing." The monk's eyes lit up with scholarly interest. "I have just the materials, Your Majesty. There are letters from brave knights who fell in service to the crown, records of great deeds and sacrifices. Such documents are quite moving and would certainly inspire loyalty and honor in young men." "Excellent," Eleanor said, then added carefully, "I recall there was a Lord William Ashford who served during my father-in-law's reign. He died tragically in a hunting accident, I believe. Do we have any of his correspondence or records of his service? His story might be particularly instructive. A talented young nobleman cut down in his prime. A reminder of how fragile life can be and how important it is to serve honorably while we can." Brother Timothy shuffled over to a cabinet, his fingers running along the spines of bound volumes. "Lord William Ashford, yes. A fine man by all accounts. His letters are here somewhere. Ah, yes." He pulled out a slender volume bound in cracked leather. His personal correspondence with the old king, and some letters to family members. There are also chronicle entries from the years of his service. Quite touching, really. He was much loved at court. Eleanor's hands trembled slightly as she took the volume, but she kept her voice steady. "Perfect. Please prepare this along with other appropriate materials and make them available in the library. Place them somewhere accessible, perhaps on that reading table by the east window where the light is good. I shall mention to Sir Damien that he might benefit from studying such documents to better understand the traditions of service he has now joined." "I shall see to it immediately, Your Majesty," Brother Timothy promised. Eleanor left the library and made her way to the training yard, where she knew the Royal Guard would be conducting their morning exercises. Sure enough, she found Damien among them, stripped to his shirt despite the cold, practicing sword forms with several other knights. Sweat glistened on his skin, and his muscles flexed powerfully with each movement. Several servant girls had found excuses to be nearby, stealing glances at the handsome new knight. Sir Harold Blackstone noticed Eleanor's arrival and immediately called the guard to attention. The knights sheathed their weapons and bowed respectfully. "Your Majesty," Harold said, "to what do we owe this honor?" "I simply wished to observe the guard's training," Eleanor replied smoothly, "and to speak briefly with Sir Damien, if I may." Harold gestured for Damien to step forward, and Eleanor saw the young knight's surprise and pleasure at being singled out by the Queen. He grabbed a towel to wipe the sweat from his face and neck before approaching her. "Your Majesty," he said, bowing, "how may I serve you?" Eleanor was acutely aware of the other knights watching, of Harold's curious expression, and most of all of Lord Pembroke, who she had spotted observing from a balcony overlooking the yard. She needed to make this seem completely natural and appropriate. "Sir Damien, last evening at the feast, I was reminded of something. As a member of the Royal Guard, you should understand not just the martial skills required, but also the history and traditions of those who have served before you. I have spoken with Brother Timothy, our librarian, and he has prepared some documents that you might find instructive. Chronicles of previous knights, letters from nobles who served the crown with distinction. I believe studying such materials will help you understand the weight and honor of the position you now hold." Damien's face showed genuine appreciation. "That is most thoughtful, Your Majesty. I confess I am eager to learn all I can about the traditions of the Royal Guard. I shall visit the library as soon as my duties permit." "Excellent," Eleanor said, allowing herself a warm smile that any queen might show to a promising young knight. "Brother Timothy will guide you to the appropriate materials. I believe you will find them quite enlightening." She turned to leave, then paused as though something had just occurred to her. "Oh, and Sir Damien, among the documents is correspondence from a Lord William Ashford, who served here many years ago. Since you share his name, you might find his story particularly interesting. He was considered one of the finest young nobles of his generation before his untimely death." She saw the flash of intense curiosity in Damien's eyes at the mention of the Ashford name. Exactly the response she had hoped for. "I shall certainly seek out those letters, Your Majesty. Thank you for bringing them to my attention." Eleanor nodded graciously and departed, feeling both relief and anxiety. She had set the wheels in motion. Now it was up to Damien to follow the trail of clues she had laid out for him, and up to fate to determine what he would discover. The rest of the day passed with agonizing slowness. Eleanor attended to her usual duties, meeting with the steward about household matters, mediating a dispute between two minor nobles over land boundaries, reviewing petitions from commoners seeking royal intervention in local matters. But her mind was elsewhere, wondering if Damien had gone to the library yet, if he had found the documents, what he might think when he read William's letters. It was not until late afternoon, as Eleanor was reviewing accounts in her private study, that Catherine entered with news. "My lady, Sir Damien has been in the library for the past 3 hours. Brother Timothy says he has been completely absorbed in reading the materials you suggested, particularly the Ashford correspondence." Eleanor's heart raced. Did Brother Timothy say what his reaction was? Did Damien ask any questions? Only to request additional documents related to the same time period. He is reading chronicle entries from the year of his birth, studying court records, asking about noble families who were present then. He is piecing things together, my lady. Eleanor stood and paced to the window, looking out at the darkening sky. Snow had begun to fall, large soft flakes that blanketed the castle grounds in white. He is intelligent. I knew he would be. William was brilliant, and I like to think I am not without wit myself. Damien will see the patterns, the timing. He will begin to suspect. The question is what he will do with those suspicions, Catherine said quietly. Will he come to you with questions? Will he keep silent? Or will he speak to others, potentially alerting Lord Pembroke to his discoveries? I do not know, Eleanor admitted, but I must trust that the man I saw in the training yard, the man who spoke so honorably in the chapel last night, will handle whatever he learns with discretion and wisdom. That evening, Eleanor attended supper in the great hall, sitting beside Edmund as they dined with various courtiers and nobles. She forced herself to eat, to smile, to engage in light conversation, all while her mind churned with worry and anticipation. Damien was present as well, standing with the other guards along the wall, but she noticed his eyes were distant, his expression thoughtful. He was clearly processing something significant. After the meal, as people began to disperse to their various evening activities, Eleanor excused herself and headed toward her chambers. She had barely reached the corridor leading to her private rooms when she heard footsteps behind her. She turned to find Damien approaching, his face serious and troubled. "Your Majesty," he said, his voice low and urgent, "forgive me for approaching you so informally, but I must speak with you. It is a matter of great importance." Eleanor's mouth went dry. This was it, the moment she had both hoped for and dreaded. "Walk with me," she said quietly, gesturing for him to follow. She led him not to her main chambers, but to a small private sitting room that she sometimes used for quiet reflection, a space where they would not be disturbed or overheard. Catherine, who had been following at a discreet distance, took up position outside the door to ensure their privacy and warn them if anyone approached. Eleanor closed the door and turned to face Damien, her heart pounding so hard she felt faint. "What did you wish to speak about, Sir Damien?" she asked, though she already knew. Damien ran his hand through his dark hair, clearly struggling with how to begin. "Your Majesty, I followed your advice and spent the afternoon in the library, reading the documents Brother Timothy prepared. The letters from Lord William Ashford were extraordinary. He wrote with such passion and eloquence, such clear love for this kingdom and for—" He paused, seeming to search for words, for someone he could not name, someone he referred to only as "my heart's desire," a woman he loved but could not openly claim. Eleanor remained silent, letting him continue, though her hands gripped her skirts to keep them from shaking. "I also read the chronicle entries from the year of my birth," Damien went on. "They mentioned that Lord William died in a hunting accident in the early autumn, just months before King Edmund's marriage to his betrothed was formalized. I learned that his betrothed, you, Your Majesty, had been at court during the months leading up to the wedding, while the king was away on campaign in France." He stepped closer, his green eyes searching hers with an intensity that took her breath away. "And then I found something else. An entry in the chronicle from several months after William's death. A brief notation that you, Your Majesty, had withdrawn from public view for a time due to illness. The dates, the timing, it all fits together in a way that I cannot ignore." Eleanor felt tears beginning to form in her eyes, but she blinked them back, maintaining the composure that had served her for so many years. "What are you asking me, Sir Damien?" "I am asking you to tell me the truth," he said, his voice breaking slightly with emotion. "I am asking if Lord William Ashford was my father, and if you are my mother." The words hung in the air between them, the secret that had been buried for 20 years finally spoken aloud. Eleanor looked at this young man, her son, and she knew that the moment for lies and evasion had passed. He deserved the truth, whatever the consequences might be. "Yes," she whispered, a single tear escaping to roll down her cheek. "Yes, Damien. William Ashford was your father and I am your mother. I gave birth to you in secret and sent you away to protect you, to protect everyone. It was the hardest thing I have ever done, and not a day has passed in 20 years that I have not thought of you, wondered about you, mourned the loss of you." Damien staggered back as though physically struck, even though he had clearly already suspected the truth. Hearing it confirmed was something else entirely. He sank into a chair, his face pale, his hands trembling. "All my life," he said hoarsely, "I have wondered who my mother was, why she gave me up. I created stories in my mind, that she was a poor girl who could not feed me, that she had died in childbirth and someone else had taken me to the Ashfords, a dozen different scenarios. But never did I imagine that my mother was the Queen of England." Eleanor knelt beside his chair, desperately wanting to touch him, to comfort him, but not daring to presume. "I was not the queen when you were born. I was merely a young noblewoman betrothed to the king, terrified and alone. Your father and we fell in love when we should not have. William was kind and beautiful and everything I had dreamed of. Our time together was brief, but it was real. When he died, I was shattered, and when I discovered I was carrying his child, your child, I knew that revealing the truth would destroy not just me but my entire family, the political alliance the marriage represented, perhaps even trigger war between noble houses. "So you sent me away," Damien said, not accusingly but with profound sadness. "You gave me to strangers and pretended I never existed. I gave you to good people who could raise you safely, away from the dangers of court politics and noble intrigue." Eleanor corrected gently. "I gave you a chance at life, Damien. If I had kept you, if the truth had come out, you would have been killed. An illegitimate child with a claim, however tenuous, to the throne. You would have been seen as a threat, eliminated before you could walk. I sacrificed my heart to save your life." Damien looked at her, really looked at her, and she saw the conflict raging behind his eyes. Anger and understanding, pain and recognition, the desperate need to reject what he had learned warring with the equally powerful need to accept it and finally know who he truly was. "I need to think," he said finally, standing abruptly. "This is too much. I came to court searching for something, feeling pulled here by a force I could not name. And now I know what it was. I was searching for you, for my mother, without even realizing it. But I do not know how to process this, how to reconcile the life I have lived with the truth of my birth." "I understand," Eleanor said, rising as well. "This is overwhelming. But Damien, you must be very careful who you speak to about this."
"There are people at court, Lord Pembroke in particular, who would use this knowledge to destroy us both. He already suspects something. He is investigating the Ashford connection, looking for any scandal he can exploit." Damien's jaw tightened, his warrior instincts clearly kicking in. Why? What would he gain from exposing the truth? "Power," Eleanor said simply. "He could use it to undermine King Edmund, to question the legitimacy of the succession, to sow discord among the nobles. You would become a political weapon, a pawn in games of power you cannot begin to imagine. And most likely, you would not survive the experience. Those who threaten the established order, even inadvertently, tend to meet with unfortunate accidents." "You mean I would be killed?" Damien said bluntly. "Yes," Eleanor confirmed, meeting his eyes steadily. "You would be killed, and I would lose you all over again, this time forever. That is why I have kept this secret for 20 years, Damien. Not to deny you your heritage, but to keep you alive." Damien paced the small room like a caged animal, his powerful frame taut with tension and conflicting emotions. Eleanor watched him, her heart breaking at the turmoil so clearly visible on his handsome features. Finally he stopped and turned to face her, his green eyes, so like her own, blazing with intensity. "What do you want from me?" he asked, his voice raw. "Do you expect me to simply accept this, to pretend nothing has changed? I am a knight of the Royal Guard, sworn to protect the king, a man who does not know that his wife bore another man's child. How can I stand in his presence, serve him loyally, while carrying this secret?" Eleanor stepped toward him, her voice gentle but firm. "King Edmund is a good man, Damien. He has been a good husband to me, a good father to our children. What happened between your father and me occurred before my marriage was formalized, during a time when Edmund was far away at war. I have been faithful to him since the day we wed, and I have served this kingdom with everything I have. Edmund does not deserve to be hurt by revelations of events that happened before our life together truly began. But he deserves to know the truth," Damien insisted. "Does he not have the right to know that one of his own guards is his wife's illegitimate son? And what good would that knowledge do?" Eleanor challenged. "It would not change the past. It would only create pain and chaos in the present. Edmund would be devastated, not by jealousy. He knows our marriage was arranged, not born of passion, but by the political implications. He would be forced to take action against you to protect the succession, to prevent any question about the legitimacy of his heirs. He would have to exile you at best, execute you at worst, even though he would hate himself for it. Is that what you want?" Damien's shoulders sagged, the fight draining out of him. No, of course not. I want—" He trailed off, his voice breaking. "I want to have known you, to have grown up with a mother who loved me instead of wondering every day why I was not wanted. I want to have known my father, to have learned from him, to carry his legacy with pride instead of in secret. I want a different life than the one I have lived, but I know I cannot have it." Eleanor could no longer restrain herself. She crossed the distance between them and took his hands in hers, looking up at his face with all the maternal love she had suppressed for 20 years shining in her eyes. "You were wanted, Damien. You were desperately wanted and loved from the moment I knew of your existence. Giving you up nearly destroyed me.
I held you for only a few hours after you were born, but in that time, I memorized every detail of your face, counted every finger and toe, whispered promises to you that I have kept in my heart ever since. I promised to love you always, even from a distance. I promised to do everything in my power to keep you safe, and I have kept those promises, even when it meant living with a pain that never fades.
Damien's eyes filled with tears, and Eleanor saw the little boy inside the powerful warrior, the child who had always wondered why his mother gave him away. "Tell me about him," Damien said quietly. "Tell me about my father. All I know is what I read in those letters. Beautiful words about honor and love, but not the man himself." Eleanor smiled through her own tears, remembering William with bittersweet clarity. He was magnificent, tall and strong like you, with the same dark hair and green eyes. He had a laugh that could light up a room, and a mind as sharp as any sword. He loved poetry and music, but he was also a fierce warrior. He could recite verses from ancient texts one moment, and then best any knight in combat the next. He was kind to servants and nobles alike, never cruel or arrogant despite his position. She led Damien to sit beside her on a cushioned bench, still holding his hands. "We met at a spring festival at court. I was 17, betrothed to Edmund but terrified because I had never met him. He was away fighting in France and had been for over a year. William was at court representing his family's interests, and he noticed me standing alone, looking lost and afraid. He approached me and asked if I would like to dance. That was all it took. One dance, one conversation, and I was lost to him." "Did he know about me?" Damien asked. "Before he died, did he know you were carrying his child?" Eleanor shook her head, fresh tears spilling down her cheeks. "No, I did not know myself until after his death. He died in September, and I did not realize I was with child until late October. If he had known, I believe he would have tried to do something. Run away with me, perhaps, or challenge the betrothal contract. It would have been disastrous, but William was honorable to a fault. He would have wanted to claim you, to give you his name properly." "How did he die?" Damien asked. "The Chronicles said a hunting accident, but was it truly an accident?" Eleanor had wondered the same thing for 20 years. "Officially, yes. His horse threw him during a hunt, and he struck his head on a rock. But William was an excellent horseman. Some at court whispered that it was no accident, that perhaps someone discovered our affair and arranged his death to protect the upcoming royal marriage. I will never know for certain, but the suspicion has haunted me." They sat in silence for a moment, both lost in thoughts of the man who had connected them, and whose death had shaped both their lives. Finally, Damien spoke again, his voice steadier now. "What happens now? I cannot unknow what I have learned, and I cannot pretend you are simply my queen when I know you are my mother. But I also understand the danger, the need for secrecy. How do we proceed?" Eleanor squeezed his hands. "Very carefully. In public, nothing changes. You are Sir Damien of Ashford, a talented knight who earned his place in the royal guard through merit. I am the queen, nothing more, nothing less. We maintain proper distance and decorum at all times." "And in private?" Damien asked. "In private, when it is safe, when we can be certain we are not observed or overheard. I would like to know you," Eleanor said, her voice filled with longing. "I would like to hear about your life, your experiences, your dreams and fears. I would like to be your mother in whatever small ways I can, even if no one else can ever know. Would that be acceptable to you?" Damien lifted her hands to his lips and kissed them gently, a gesture of respect and affection that made Eleanor's heart soar. "More than acceptable. I have wondered about you for so long, created images in my mind of who you might be. To discover that you are a woman of such strength and grace, someone I can admire and respect, it is more than I ever hoped for. But mother, may I call you that, at least when we are alone?" "Please," Eleanor whispered, overcome with emotion. "Please call me that. I have waited 20 years to hear it." "Mother," Damien said, testing the word, and Eleanor saw the wonder in his face as he spoke it. "I understand the need for secrecy, and I will be careful. But you must understand that this changes everything for me. I came to court seeking purpose, seeking to serve honorably. Now I have an even greater reason, protecting you, protecting the king and kingdom that you love, even if it means keeping the truth of my birth hidden forever." Their moment was interrupted by a soft knock at the door. Catherine's urgent voice came through. "Your Majesty, Lord Pembroke is in the corridor."
He seems to be searching for something, or someone. Eleanor and Damien sprang apart, immediately adopting more formal postures. Eleanor quickly wiped her tears away and composed her features into the serene mask of the Queen. "You must leave through the servants' passage," she whispered to Damien. "Catherine will show you. Go now, quickly." Damien hesitated, clearly reluctant to leave her, but Eleanor pushed him toward the small door hidden behind a tapestry that led to the servants' corridors. Catherine appeared and gestured urgently for him to follow. He cast one last look at Eleanor, his eyes full of unspoken emotion, before disappearing through the passage. Eleanor took a moment to steady her breathing and ensure her appearance was beyond reproach before opening the door to the corridor. Lord Pembroke stood there, his sharp eyes immediately scanning the room behind her. "Your Majesty," he said, bowing with exaggerated courtesy. "Forgive the intrusion, but I was told you might be in this wing of the castle. I have urgent news regarding the southern provinces that requires your attention." "Could it not wait until morning, Lord Chancellor?" Eleanor asked coolly. "The hour is late, and I was preparing to retire." "I apologize for the timing, Your Majesty, but the matter is pressing. There have been reports of bandits attacking trade caravans, and the king wished for your counsel on how to respond." Pembroke's eyes continued to dart around, clearly looking for something. "I thought I saw Sir Damien heading in this direction. He was not with you, was he?" Eleanor met his gaze steadily, allowing just a hint of frost to enter her voice. "Sir Damien is a member of the Royal Guard, Lord Pembroke, not my personal attendant. I have no idea where he might be at this hour, though I suspect he is attending to his duties like any conscientious knight. Now, if you have business to discuss, we can speak in my study, not in the corridor like common servants." Pembroke bowed again, but his eyes remained calculating. "Of course, Your Majesty. Please lead the way." They spent the next hour discussing the situation in the southern provinces. Though Eleanor was acutely aware that Pembroke was watching her every reaction, every word, searching for any sign of the secret she carried, she played her role perfectly, offering intelligent counsel and thoughtful suggestions while revealing nothing of the emotional turmoil roiling beneath her composed exterior. When Pembroke finally departed, Eleanor sagged into her chair, exhausted by the effort of maintaining her facade. Catherine, who had been waiting outside, entered immediately. "Sir Damien made it safely to the guards' quarters without being seen," Catherine reported. "But, my lady, this is becoming increasingly dangerous. Pembroke is actively hunting now. He knows something is amiss, even if he does not yet know exactly what." "I know," Eleanor said wearily. "But what can we do? We cannot stop him from investigating, and we cannot reveal the truth without putting Damien in mortal danger." Catherine sat beside her mistress, her weathered face full of concern. "Perhaps it is time to consider other options. What if we were to send Sir Damien away? Not as punishment or exile, but as an honored assignment. The king could send him to establish relations with one of the neighboring kingdoms, or to lead a mission to secure the borders. It would remove him from Pembroke's immediate scrutiny and give us time to deal with the Chancellor's suspicions." Eleanor considered this. "It would certainly be safer for Damien. But Catherine, I just found him. I just revealed the truth, began to build a relationship with my son. Sending him away now would be unbearable." "I understand, my lady."
"But which is more unbearable? A temporary separation that keeps him safe, or having him close while constantly fearing that Pembroke will uncover enough evidence to move against him?" Eleanor knew Catherine was right, but the thought of sending Damien away, of losing him again so soon after finding him, was almost more than she could bear. "Let me think on it," she said finally. "Perhaps there is another way, some means of neutralizing Pembroke's threat without separating myself from my son." The next few days were torture for Eleanor. She saw Damien regularly in his capacity as a royal guard, standing watch during court sessions, accompanying the king on his daily activities, but they could exchange nothing more than brief, formal words. The weight of their secret hung between them, visible only to those who knew to look for it. Eleanor threw herself into her royal duties with renewed vigor, attending council meetings, reviewing petitions, mediating disputes, anything to keep her mind occupied. But at night, alone in her chambers, she allowed herself to grieve for all the lost years, for the relationship she could never openly claim, for the son who stood so close and yet remained unreachable. It was on the 5th day after her revelation to Damien that disaster struck. Eleanor was in the Great Hall discussing trade agreements with a delegation of merchants from the Northern Territories when Lord Pembroke entered with an expression of barely contained excitement. "Your Majesties," he said, bowing to both Eleanor and Edmund. "I apologize for the interruption, but I have uncovered a matter of grave importance that requires immediate attention." Edmund frowned, clearly annoyed at the disruption. "Can it not wait, Pembroke? We are conducting important business." "I fear not, Your Majesty. This concerns the security and honor of the crown itself." Pembroke's eyes glittered with malicious triumph as he looked directly at Eleanor. "I have been investigating certain irregularities in court records, as I mentioned previously, and I have discovered evidence of a scandal that was hidden 20 years ago, a secret that strikes at the very heart of the royal family." Eleanor felt the blood drain from her face, but she forced herself to remain calm, to show nothing of the terror gripping her heart. "What scandal do you speak of, Lord Chancellor?" she asked, her voice cold and steady. Pembroke produced a rolled parchment from his robes. "I have here sworn testimony from a midwife who attended a secret birth in the eastern provinces 20 years ago. She describes assisting at the delivery of a male child to a young noblewoman who refused to reveal her identity, but who bore unmistakable signs of high birth. The timing of this birth corresponds exactly with a period when Your Majesty withdrew from court, claiming illness." Edmund turned to Eleanor, confusion and the first stirrings of concern on his face. "Eleanor? What is he talking about?" Before Eleanor could respond, Pembroke continued relentlessly. "Furthermore, I have documents proving that a substantial sum of gold was paid to the family who raised this child, the Ashfords of Millbrook, from a source that can be traced back to the Queen's household accounts. And finally, I have had the opportunity to closely observe Sir Damien of Ashford, the young knight recently appointed to Your Majesty's guard. The resemblance between him and Her Majesty is quite striking, particularly the unusual color of their eyes." The hall had gone completely silent. Every noble, merchant, and servant present was frozen, shocked by the magnitude of the accusation Pembroke was making. Edmund's face had gone pale, his hands gripping the arms of his throne. "Are you suggesting," the king said slowly, his voice dangerous, "that my wife bore a child before our marriage? An illegitimate child that she hid from me?" "I am not suggesting, Your Majesty," Pembroke said with false regret. "I am stating it as established fact. The evidence is overwhelming. Her Majesty gave birth to Sir Damien of Ashford approximately 9 months after the death of Lord William Ashford, with whom she is known to have spent considerable time during your absence in France. She concealed this pregnancy, sent the child away, and has kept this secret throughout your entire marriage." Eleanor stood, drawing herself up to her full height, every inch the Queen despite the catastrophe unfolding around her. She would not cower, would not deny what was true. "Lord Pembroke's facts are correct," she said clearly, her voice ringing through the silent hall, "though his implications are deliberately inflammatory. Yes, I bore a child before my marriage to King Edmund was formalized. Yes, that child was William Ashford's son. And yes, I sent him away to protect him, to protect my family, and to preserve the alliance that my marriage to Edmund represented." The great hall erupted in shocked whispers and gasps. Nobles turned to one another with expressions of disbelief and scandal, while servants pressed against the walls, eyes wide with the magnitude of what they were witnessing. Eleanor stood perfectly still, her chin raised, refusing to show weakness, even as her world threatened to collapse around her. Edmund rose from his throne, his face a mask of conflicting emotions: betrayal, anger, confusion, and beneath it all, a deep hurt that cut Eleanor to her core. "You kept this from me for 25 years?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper but carrying clearly through the now silent hall. "Throughout our entire marriage, you carried this secret?" "I did," Eleanor confirmed, meeting his eyes steadily. "And I would do it again, Edmund, because revealing it would have destroyed everything. It would have shattered the alliance between our families, potentially caused war, and most certainly resulted in the death of an innocent child. I made the choice I believed was right, the only choice that protected everyone I cared about." Lord Pembroke stepped forward, clearly eager to press his advantage. "Your Majesty, this is a grave betrayal of trust. The Queen has deceived you from the very beginning of your marriage, and now she has brought this illegitimate son into your very household, into your personal guard, without revealing his true identity. Who knows what plots she might be weaving? Perhaps she seeks to place her bastard son on the throne in place of your legitimate heirs? That is a lie." Eleanor's voice cracked like a whip,
her composure finally breaking under the weight of Pembroke's vicious accusation. "I have no designs on the throne for Damien or anyone else. I have served this kingdom faithfully for 25 years, supported my husband in all things, raised our children to honor their father and their responsibilities. Everything I have done has been to protect this family and this realm, not to undermine it." "Where is Sir Damien?" Edmund demanded, his voice hard. "Bring him here. Now." Sir Harold Blackstone, looking deeply uncomfortable, gestured to one of the other guards, who rushed from the hall. The minutes that followed were excruciating. Eleanor remained standing, refusing to sit or show any sign of weakness, while Edmund stared at her with an expression she could not read. The assembled court watched in rapt silence, bearing witness to the unfolding of a scandal that would be spoken of for generations. Finally, Damien entered the hall, his face pale but composed. He had clearly been informed of what was happening, and Eleanor saw the determination in his eyes as he strode forward to stand before the king. He knelt, bowing his head in respect. "Your Majesty," he said clearly, "I have been told that my parentage has been revealed. I wish to state for the record that I knew nothing of my true heritage until a few days ago, when I discovered the truth through my own investigations. Her Majesty did not seek me out or attempt to manipulate events to bring me to court. I came here of my own will, seeking to serve the crown. And now that you know," Edmund asked, his voice dangerously quiet, "now that you know you are the Queen's bastard son, born of her liaison with another man, what are your intentions, Sir Damien?" Damien raised his head, meeting the king's gaze directly. "My intentions are exactly what they were before I knew the truth, Your Majesty. To serve you faithfully, to protect the kingdom, and to uphold the values of honor and loyalty that my adoptive parents instilled in me. I have no claim to the throne and seek none. I am a knight, nothing more, and I wish only to fulfill my oath to you." "Pretty words," Pembroke sneered. "But how can His Majesty trust them? You are the product of the Queen's betrayal, a living reminder of her deception. Your very existence is a stain on the royal family's honor." "Enough." Edmund's shout silenced the Chancellor. The king stood, his powerful frame radiating authority and barely controlled fury. "I will hear no more from you today, Pembroke. You have brought this matter to my attention, as was your duty, but I will not have you poisoning the discourse with your accusations and insinuations. Leave us, all of you. Clear the hall. I would speak with the Queen and Sir Damien alone." There was a scramble as nobles, merchants, servants, and guards all hastened to obey, though Eleanor could see the reluctance in their faces. Everyone wanted to witness how this drama would unfold. Within minutes, the great hall was empty, save for Edmund, Eleanor, Damien, and Sir Harold, whom Edmund had requested to remain as witness. Edmund descended from the throne and paced before them, his hands clasped behind his back. When he finally spoke, his voice was heavy with emotion. "Eleanor, I am not a fool. I knew when we married that you did not love me. Our union was arranged by our fathers for political advantage, and I accepted that. I had been at war for years, had seen terrible things, done terrible things. I did not expect a love match, but I did expect honesty. I expected loyalty, and I thought, over the years, that we had built something real between us. Respect, partnership, perhaps even a form of love." "We did," Eleanor said, tears streaming down her face now. "Edmund, everything I have felt for you, every moment of our marriage, has been real. You have been a good husband, a good father, a good king. I have loved you in my own way, even if it was not the passionate romance of my youth. You have been my partner, my friend, my anchor in the storms of court politics. That has never been a lie. But you kept this from me," Edmund said, his voice breaking. "For 25 years, you looked at me every day knowing you had borne another man's child, sent him away, and never once trusted me enough to tell me the truth, because I was afraid." Eleanor's composure shattered completely, and she fell to her knees before her husband, her hands outstretched in supplication. "I was terrified of what you would do, what you would have to do. I knew that if you learned the truth, you would be forced to take action against Damien to protect the succession, even if it broke your heart. And I could not bear to put you in that position, to make you choose between justice and mercy, between political necessity and human compassion. So I chose to carry the burden alone, to protect both you and my son from impossible choices." Damien moved forward, kneeling beside Eleanor. "Your Majesty, if I may speak. My mother, he paused, clearly struggling with the word but pressing on, made her choices out of love and fear, trying to protect everyone. But I am a man now, capable of bearing the consequences of my birth. If my existence threatens the stability of the kingdom or the security of your legitimate heirs, then do what you must. Exile me, imprison me, execute me if necessary. I will not resist. But I beg you, do not punish Her Majesty for the choices she made when she was young and frightened and alone. Edmund looked at them both, the wife who had kept such a momentous secret from him, and the young man who was the living embodiment of that secret, and Eleanor saw the war raging behind his eyes. Finally, he sank into a chair, suddenly looking every one of his 48 years. I need time to think, he said wearily. This is too much to process in the heat of the moment. Sir Harold, you will ensure that Sir Damien is confined to quarters under guard until I decide what is to be done. Not as punishment, but for his own protection. There will be those at court who see him as a threat now that the truth is known. Eleanor, you will retire to your chambers as well. I must consider what this revelation means for the kingdom, for the succession, for everything we have built. Edmund, Eleanor began, but he raised his hand to silence her. Please, Eleanor. I have loved you in my own way, as you say you have loved me. But right now, I cannot look at you without feeling the weight of this deception. Give me time to come to terms with what I have learned. Then we shall speak again and determine the path forward. Eleanor bowed her head in acceptance, knowing she had no choice but to comply. As Sir Harold gently but firmly escorted Damien from the hall, the young knight looked back at her one last time, his eyes full of sorrow and determination. Eleanor watched him go, her heart breaking at the thought that she might have found her son only to lose him again, this time forever. The next 3 days were the longest of Eleanor's life. She remained in her chambers as Edmund had requested, seeing no one except Catherine and the servants who brought her meals. The castle was abuzz with gossip about the scandal. She could hear the whispers even through her closed doors, could imagine the speculation and judgment spreading through every corridor and courtyard. Catherine brought her what news she could gather. The court is divided, she reported on the second day. Some nobles believe you should be set aside, your marriage to the king annulled, and you sent to a convent. Others argue that the events occurred before your marriage was formalized, and therefore should not affect your current position. Lord Pembroke is actively campaigning for your removal, claiming you represent a moral stain on the crown. And Damien? Eleanor asked, her voice hoarse from crying. What news of my son? He remains confined to quarters, but is treated well. Sir Harold has made it clear that anyone who attempts to harm him will answer to the captain of the guard personally. The young man has won Harold's respect through his conduct. He accepts his confinement without complaint, and speaks of nothing but his loyalty to the king and his concern for your well-being. On the morning of the 4th day, Edmund finally sent for her. Eleanor dressed with great care, choosing a simple but elegant gown of deep blue, with her hair braided simply and adorned only with a silver circlet. She wanted to appear humble and respectful, not defiant or presumptuous. She found Edmund in his private study, a room filled with maps and documents, where he conducted the daily business of ruling. He looked tired, as though he had not slept well, but his expression was calmer than when she had last seen him. Sit, Eleanor, he said, gesturing to a chair across from his desk. We must talk plainly, without the performance required in the great hall. Eleanor sat, folding her hands in her lap to keep them from trembling. I am ready to hear whatever you have decided, Edmund. I will accept your judgment without protest. Edmund studied her for a long moment, then sighed deeply. I have spent these past days in reflection and prayer, seeking guidance on how to proceed. I have reviewed the chronicles of the time before our marriage, spoken with those who were at court then, and tried to understand the circumstances that led to your choices. He paused, choosing his words carefully. What I have concluded is this. You were very young, barely 18 when you became involved with William Ashford. I was away at war, fighting battles in a foreign land, while you were here, betrothed to a man you had never met, surrounded by the pressures of court politics. William Ashford was by all accounts a good man, honorable and kind. That you found comfort in his company. That affection grew into something more. I cannot condemn you for being human. Eleanor felt tears beginning to form, but blinked them back, not wanting to miss a word of what Edmund was saying. Furthermore,
he continued. When you discovered you were carrying his child, you faced an impossible situation. If you had revealed the truth, it would indeed have caused tremendous harm. To your family, to the political alliance, to the innocent child himself. The choice you made to send him away, to give him a chance at life, rather than certain death, that was an act of love, however painful. Edmund, Eleanor whispered, hardly daring to hope. He raised his hand. However, the fact remains that you kept this secret from me throughout our marriage. That is a betrayal of trust that I cannot simply overlook. A marriage, even one born of political necessity, must be built on honesty between partners. You denied me the opportunity to know this truth, to help you bear this burden, to perhaps find a solution together. I know, Eleanor said, her voice breaking. And I am sorry, Edmund. Truly sorry. If I could go back and make different choices, I would tell you the truth from the beginning. But I was so afraid. Afraid of losing you. Afraid of what you would be forced to do. Afraid that my mistake would destroy everything good that we had built together. Edmund nodded slowly. I believe you. And that is why I have decided on the following course of action. He stood and moved to the window, looking out at the castle grounds. You will remain as queen. Your position will not be challenged or diminished. The marriage was legal and binding, formalized after the birth of your son, and nothing about this revelation changes that fundamental fact. Eleanor gasped, relief flooding through her so powerfully she felt lightheaded. Edmund, thank you. Thank you for your mercy and understanding. I am not finished, Edmund said firmly. As for Sir Damien, I have spoken with him at length. He is a good man, Eleanor, honorable, skilled, and genuinely loyal, despite the difficult circumstances of his birth. I believe him when he says he has no designs on the throne and wishes only to serve. Therefore he too shall remain, though not as a member of the royal guard. Eleanor's relief turned to confusion. What do you mean? Edmund turned to face her. I am appointing him as my personal emissary to the Northern Territories. There are ongoing negotiations with the Scottish lords regarding border disputes and trade agreements. Damien will represent my interests in these talks, learning diplomacy and statecraft while also demonstrating his loyalty to the crown through faithful service. It is a position of honor and responsibility, but it will also keep him away from court for extended periods, reducing the opportunities for scandal and allowing the gossip to die down. It was a brilliant solution, Eleanor realized. One that protected Damien while also acknowledging his abilities and giving him a meaningful role to play. You are sending him away, she said softly, understanding the full implications. Temporarily, yes, Edmund confirmed. But Eleanor, understand this. He is not being exiled or punished. He will return to court periodically to report on his progress, and eventually, when enough time has passed and the scandal has faded, he may take up a permanent position here if he wishes. I am giving both of you a path forward, a way to have some form of relationship, while protecting the kingdom from those who would use the situation to sow discord. Eleanor rose and crossed to her husband, taking his hands in hers. Edmund, you are showing more kindness and wisdom than I deserve. Thank you. Thank you for not destroying my son, for giving him a future, for allowing me to remain at your side despite my deception. Edmund squeezed her hands, and she saw both pain and compassion in his eyes. I am doing this because I believe it is right, Eleanor, but I will not pretend that our marriage is unchanged by this revelation. It will take time for me to fully trust you again, to move past the hurt of your long deception. We will continue to present a united front in public, to rule together as we always have. But privately there is healing that must occur between us. I understand, Eleanor said, and I will spend the rest of my life earning back your trust, proving that despite my failings, I am worthy of your faith and partnership. That afternoon, Eleanor was permitted to see Damien before his departure for the Northern Territories. They met in the same small sitting room where she had first revealed the truth to him, with Catherine once again standing guard to ensure their privacy. Damien embraced her the moment he entered, and Eleanor held her son tightly, memorizing the feel of his strong arms around her, the sound of his heartbeat beneath her ear. When they finally separated, both had tears streaming down their faces. I am so sorry, Eleanor said. Sorry that my choices have led to this, that you must leave court just as we were beginning to know each other. Do not apologize, Mother, Damien said firmly, using the word with confidence now. The king is being more than fair. He could have had me executed or exiled permanently, declared me an enemy of the crown. Instead, He is giving me an opportunity to prove myself, to serve the kingdom in a meaningful way. I am grateful for his mercy. You are so much like your father, Eleanor said, touching his face gently. William would have been so proud of the man you have become. Strong, honorable, kind. Everything good in him lives on in you. Damien covered her hand with his own. And I see my strength reflected in you, Mother. The courage it took to make the choices you made, to carry that secret for so long, to protect me even at great cost to yourself, that is true strength. I am proud to be your son, even if the world can never fully know it. They talked for hours, cramming a lifetime of missed conversations into the limited time they had. Eleanor told him stories of his father, of their brief time together, of the love they had shared. Damien shared memories of his childhood, of the Ashfords who had raised him with kindness, of his training and his dreams for the future. It was bittersweet, this precious time together, knowing it would soon end. As evening fell and the time came for Damien to depart, Eleanor walked with him to the castle courtyard where his horse waited, already packed for the journey north. Several other knights would accompany him, both as protection and as witnesses to his diplomatic efforts. "When will you return?" Eleanor asked, though she already knew the answer. It would be months at least, possibly longer depending on how the negotiations progressed. "As soon as my duties permit," Damien promised. "And when I do return, I will have proven myself worthy of the king's trust and your pride. I will make you both proud, Mother. I swear it." Eleanor embraced him one final time, whispering words that only he could hear. "You already make me proud. You always have. From the moment I first held you as an infant. Go with my blessing, my son, and know that you carry my love with you always." Damien mounted his horse, and Eleanor stood with Edmund, who had come to see him off. Together they watched as the young knight rode through the castle gates and disappeared into the gathering dusk, heading north to forge his future and prove his worth to a kingdom that now knew the secret of his birth. In the months that followed, life at court gradually returned to normal, though Eleanor was acutely aware of the whispers that would always follow her now. Some nobles treated her with subtle disdain, while others showed surprising support, acknowledging that she had been young and in an impossible situation. Lord Pembroke, though frustrated that his revelation had not destroyed Eleanor as he had hoped, found his own influence diminished. Many at court viewed his exposure of the secret as unnecessarily cruel and politically motivated. Reports came regularly from the north, and each one brought news of Damien's success. He proved to be a skilled negotiator, earning the respect of the Scottish lords through his honesty and fair dealing. The border disputes were resolved peacefully, and new trade agreements were established that benefited both kingdoms. Edmund read these reports with growing approval, and Eleanor saw that the king was genuinely impressed by her son's capabilities. As the seasons changed and a year passed, Eleanor and Edmund worked to rebuild the trust between them. It was not easy. There were difficult conversations, moments of pain and recrimination, times when the wound of her long-held secret felt too deep to heal. But slowly, gradually, they found their way back to each other. Edmund came to understand the impossible position Eleanor had been in, and Eleanor learned to be more open, to trust her husband with her fears and vulnerabilities rather than hiding them away. When Damien finally returned to court after 18 months in the north, he came as a changed man, more confident, more polished, his diplomatic skills honed through hard-won experience. Edmund received him warmly, praising his service publicly and offering him a permanent position as the king's advisor on northern affairs. It was a role that allowed Damien to be at court regularly, while also maintaining the respectability that came from having proven himself through merit rather than birth. Eleanor watched her son take his oath of service once again, this time not just as a knight but as a trusted counselor to the king, and her heart swelled with pride and joy. She caught Damien's eye across the great hall, and they exchanged a small secret smile, a mother and son who had found their way back to each other against all odds. That evening, Edmund surprised Eleanor by arranging a private dinner for the three of them in his chambers, an acknowledgement that while the world might not know the full truth of their relationships, within this small circle, they could be themselves. As they shared a meal and conversation, Eleanor felt something she had not experienced in 20 years, complete peace. "To family," Edmund said, raising his glass in a toast. "To the bonds we choose and the ones we are born to. May we continue to honor both." "To family," Eleanor and Damien echoed, their glasses meeting with a clear, pure chime.
As Eleanor looked at the two men seated at the table with her, the husband who had shown her mercy and the son she had never stopped loving, she understood that sometimes the greatest love stories are not about passion and romance, but about forgiveness, acceptance, and the courage to face impossible choices with grace. Her secret was no longer a burden she carried alone, and though the journey had been painful, it had led them all to this moment of genuine connection and understanding. The kingdom would endure, strengthened rather than weakened by the truth that had finally come to light. And Eleanor, who had lived so long with the weight of her hidden shame, could finally breathe freely, her son at her side and her husband's respect restored. It was not the fairy tale ending she had once dreamed of as a young girl, but it was something far more valuable, a real, hard-won happiness built on truth, sacrifice, and the enduring power of love in all its complicated, beautiful forms.